In this video, we're going to dive deep into handling credit cards inside YNAB. My name is Nick True, and I've done over 6,000 hours of one-on-one coaching calls helping people with their budgets inside of YNAB. And now I'm ready to help you understand everything you need to know about handling credit cards. With that being said, let's jump in. Before I show you handling credit cards specifically in YNAB, we need to remember that YNAB is a digital envelope system, and that if you think of these different categories here as little bitty envelopes, then it will help you think and understand credit cards better. So imagine that each one of these categories is their own physical envelope, and this money up top and ready to assign is money that we physically possess in our bank accounts right now. You'll see that mine just so happens to match my bank account balance over here on the left-hand side, which yours may or may not actually match it right now. That's okay. I have other videos that talk about handling that. But anyways, we've got ready to assign. It's the money in our bank account. These are envelopes, and I can take this money and put it down into an envelope. So that means I can't budget for groceries or gas or eating out unless I physically possess the money in my bank account to do that thing. Now, most of us, or a lot of Americans anyways, are putting those expenses on credit cards. So what we need to understand is how YNAB handles this. In order to really walk through this, I want to do a mental exercise to kind of imagine how this happens in real life before I show you how this happens in YNAB. So let's pretend, for example, that we have an envelope here. That is our groceries envelope. I'm going to draw a little G there. And imagine that you've got some money in it. We've got some dollar bills that are sort of sticking out of this grocery envelope here. And imagine you go to the grocery store. You get a bunch of things in your cart, you push it up to the checkout line, and then you swipe a debit card. What happens? Well, money leaves your physical bank account when you swipe that debit card. And so you would imagine that if you had a grocery envelope, money would also leave the grocery envelope. So far, so good. Hopefully that makes sense. Now let's back this up a little bit. Let's pretend that you go to the exact same grocery store, you get the exact same groceries, but this time you swipe a credit card. In this case, if you swipe a credit card for those groceries, your bank account balance remains the same, right? When you swipe a credit card, nothing happens to your checking account. The money that is physically there is still there. And so as far as YNAB's concerned, the money in the category should still be there, right? Wrong. Yes, the money is still in your bank account, but what YNAB does behind the scenes is it creates this brand new envelope called the credit card payment category, or pay back your credit card, and it moves the money for you. It takes the money out of the grocery envelope and it sticks it here into the credit card payment envelope. So the total amount of money in your bank account doesn't change, but the job of the dollars change. The dollars that were supposed to buy you groceries, YNAB knows, hey, you didn't actually use those physical dollars to buy groceries. You took out a loan via the credit card to buy your groceries. So what we're going to do is, behind the scenes, we're going to change the job of the dollars and we're going to move them into the credit card payment category. So now those dollars are not for groceries. They are to pay back the credit card company because the credit card company bought your groceries. Now, a lot of people hate that YNAB does this at first because it's a very different way of thinking about credit cards. But I promise you, if you can embrace this system and give it some time to sink in, you will love it. Because as you're going to see throughout the rest of this video, this is what keeps you from racking up credit card debt. This single feature alone is tremendously helpful to allow you to load up your credit cards every single month and get your points or whatever you want to do, but still make sure that you're staying in your budget and not going to end up overspending and creating debt. To explain this even further, let's actually now show this inside of the categories. So here I am in the budget. I've got some money up here and ready to assign, and I'm now going to allocate this money down. I'm going to go ahead and just fully budget for all of my fun spending this month. Here we go. All right. So I've got some money in my envelopes or categories, and I'm ready to go buy some stuff. I'm going to open up just the credit card payment section and the monthly living section, and I want you to hone in on the groceries category. Let's say that I go to Publix. I'm going to manually enter a transaction. Of course, if you're linking your accounts, you'll just categorize these as YNAB pulls them in from the bank. But I'm going to manually enter a $100 charge at Publix and hit save. Now notice I'm doing this in a checking account. Okay, it's a cash-based account. So what happens is when I go to the budget, you'll notice right here in the assigned column, this first column here, I've assigned $800 for the month. So far, I have spent $100. The activity column is populated from the transaction list on the account. And so I now have available $700. Now, if these definitions of these words are new to you, be sure to use the link down in the description below to download my YNAB cheat sheet. It has a whole list of different words in YNAB and their definitions, and it'll help you understand what these mean, as well as words like targets and underfunded, etc. Okay, back over here. I've assigned 800, I spent 100, I have 700 left. The money left my checking account. This checking account balance went down, so all is well. Okay, that is the first example we walked through using a debit card. I want you to pay attention. We're going to do the exact same thing. This time we're going to do it on this Discover Miles card right here. So I'm going to click on this Discover Miles card, and I'm going to add a transaction. Now again, if you are linking your accounts to YNAB, well then YNAB is going to actually pull this in for you. So it'll look like this, and it'll say, hey, this needs a category. I'm going to double click and say that is my groceries category. Hit this and hit save. And now let's pay attention first to what happened to the bank account balances. The Discover Miles balance went up by $100. So I now owe $100 more to the Discover card, but my checking account balance didn't change. All right, let me hit the undo button. If I hit undo, Discover is back at $25. Mercury is 6113. Redo. Discover is 125. Mercury is still 6113. So the total amount of cash in my budget hasn't changed. Remember, if you've watched any of my other videos, the available column plus ready to assign is all of the cash that I have in my bank accounts. You'll notice, if you're paying very close attention here, that what has happened is that YNAB has moved money from the groceries envelope up to the Discover Miles envelope. A minute ago, I had $700 in the groceries category. That is money in my bank account that's job is to buy groceries. And now I only have $600. It took $100 and moved it from groceries up to the Discover Miles category, setting aside the money so that I can then make my credit card payment to pay off the groceries that I've charged to the card. In fact, if I actually click this 100 right here in the activity on the credit card, you'll actually see that charge listed there. It's going to show all of the charges that have hit the Discover Miles card in this month. Now, I'm not going to explain some of these numbers right here just yet. You don't need to understand those right at this moment, but basically it just shows, hey, so far this month, you've spent $100 and you funded that spending. And so that's your total activity and total spending. Long story short, it took $100 from here and moved it to here. To kind of drive this point home, I'm going to add a few more transactions. So let's go to Nick Fun Spending, and I'm going to buy a hat for $55. Then let's go to the Waffle House, and let's go eat out for $45. Then let's order something from Amazon, and we're going to put this into Hannah's Fun Spending money. And let's say she spent $25, and then we'll go to Chick-fil-A and we'll put that in eating out, and let's say that was $40. Great. And so now you'll notice that every time I'm doing that, YNAB is taking money from these categories and moving it right up here to the Discover Miles category. And now I actually have $265 available to make a credit card payment because it takes it from these envelopes, these categories, and puts it right up here. In the same way that if I want to see how much money I have available to go out to eat or to buy groceries, I'm going to scroll down and look at the available column, and it tells me, hey, you got $600 available for groceries. Or if I come down to my fun spending and I look at my eating out, it says I have $155 left that I could use to eat out. In the same way, if I'm trying to make a credit card payment and I want to know how much can I afford to pay to my credit card, I'm going to look at the credit card category and I'm going to look at the available column, and it's going to tell me, hey, if you want to make a credit card payment, you can afford to pay $265. Now, we're going to cover a number of other things about credit cards here in a second, about how to handle these other columns and what to do about starting balances. But this right here is the fundamental key that you've got to try to understand if you want to still use credit cards and use them properly in YNAB. The key thing right now is that as long as you are budgeting for the actual spending on the card, right, you are assigning money for eating out, for gas, for groceries, for fun spending. As long as you are assigning money to those things, then YNAB will always move it from those categories to the credit card payment category as you spend. In this way, you will never ever rack up credit card debt because it will automatically take the money from where you spent it and set it aside to pay back the credit card company. Now, the key, of course, here is to not have overspending, because if you overspend in a category, well, then YNAB has no money to move. So let me show you that. Let's come back to the Discover card. Let's say that I go to Amazon this time and I'm going to put it into Nick's fun spending. And let's say I just totally blow through my fun spending money. Let's say I go ahead and spend $200 even though I only have $20. I'm going to hit save. And then now all of a sudden, check this out. I am now overspent on this category. And it actually tells me, I have a little credit card symbol with an exclamation point. That tells me this is overspending on a credit card. And now this 180, YNAB does not move up here to the Discover Miles card. Let's go ahead and add another one. You'll notice, if you pay real close attention, let me show you this. There's $285 right now. So if I want to make a credit card payment, I can pay $285. Now let's make this really big. I'm going to go ahead and add another Amazon charge, and I'm going to put $1,500 on it, okay? All in the Nick Fun Spending category. Now when I hit save, my bank balance for this credit card, what I owe, just went up, and I now owe $1,990. And if I go to the budget, I'm now overspent, and I still can only make a $285 payment. So if I don't cover my overspending, that will create debt, because now YNAB can't move the money because there is no money to move. There's no money in my bank account that is sitting in Nick spending that it can then move to the credit card payment. And so now I've just created debt. Now, if I start to cover this, let's go ahead and take the rest of my groceries money, and then let's take Hannah's fun spending, and then let's take eating out. If you notice, every time I've been taking that, it's moving it from those categories to Nick fun spending to the credit card. And so now all of a sudden, let's cover the rest of this from ready to assign. And boom, now I have $1,965 that I can use to pay the credit card. So one of the big takeaways here is that you never want to have overspending that you leave uncovered unless you are doing it very intentionally and you know that you need to rack up some debt, which sometimes that happens in life. And when it does, we just have to deal with it and make the best of it. But in an ideal world, we are trying to not create debt. So we want to make sure we are covering the overspending on our credit cards. And if you don't do that, then YNAB will not have the money to move it to the credit card payment category. And when it comes time, you will not have enough money here to actually pay back the credit card. Speaking of the credit card payment category, another sort of misconception here, a lot of people don't know what this is for, and they will just see, oh, well, I have $1,900 just sitting there. I'm going to take that and go do something else with it. So maybe they take this and they go move it to some sort of savings category. I'll put it towards my small trips. And now all of a sudden, I just took this money out of my credit card payment, which the job is to pay back the credit card. I just took that money out. And so now when I go to make a credit card payment, check it out, I owe $1,990. I don't have any money to pay my credit card. So by taking money out of this category, I just created debt. So you want to avoid doing that. You almost never, there are a few rare circumstances, but you almost never should be taking money out of your credit card payment category. And speaking of credit card payment category, let's actually talk about credit card payments next. Here's the big idea with these. Credit card payments in YNAB, you want to think of them as transfers. Essentially, I want you to imagine that there's a box drawn on the left-hand side around your bank accounts and your credit cards. If money enters the box, like you make money, you earn income, that needs to get a category. And if money leaves the box, like you buy something, then that also needs to get a category. But if you simply move money within the box, right? We take money from Mercury and move it to the credit card, right? From Mercury, pay the credit card. That is simply transferring money within the box. And transfers in YNAB are handled in the payee section of the transaction. I'm going to show you that in just 1 second, but let me say one more thing. If you think about the way that we're doing this with our categories, we are taking money that's in your checking and we are assigning it down here to these different categories. So we're budgeting $16.99 for Spotify and $88.90 for car insurance and $14.99 for Netflix and $79.90 for gym membership. We are taking money that is physically in our checking account and we're setting it aside for these specific things. If you needed to also set aside money for the credit card, which the credit card pays these things, then you would be double budgeting, right? If I had to budget for Spotify and then I had to also budget to pay the credit card because the credit card paid Spotify, I'd be budgeting twice, which makes no sense. That again goes back to YNAB is moving the money for us as long as we budget for these things, which means the money will already be there to make the credit card payment. So when it comes time to pay, it is a transfer. All right, let me show this. So we're going to add a transaction. Again, YNAB's probably going to just pull this in from your bank account for you. I'm going to say discover payment, and then it's going to come through, and let's say that I paid $1,000. All right, so it's going to look like this, and I'm going to come into my YNAB and say, oh, I need to deal with this thing, and instead of giving it a category, I'm actually going to come right here to the payee, and I'm going to choose payment to discover miles. Now, just FYI, there actually is a category for this, but I found that getting in the habit of thinking about this as a payee transfer can be helpful for learning. So I could choose Discover Miles and it would do what needs to get done here, but I actually want to really hone in on this idea that what this is it is a transfer, and transfers are done in the payee section. This will help your learning, especially if you are running multiple bank accounts, but I digress. So I'm going to click right here, and you'll notice at the very top, it gives me a list of the other bank accounts that I have in YNAB. And in this case, I'm going to choose Payment to Discover. And then now when I hit save, you will notice that YNAB has added this little transferee arrow icon. That tells us that this transaction is actually interacting with another bank account in our budget. And if I were to actually click this, it would take me to the other account. So notice, check it out. I'm here in the Mercury account. If I click this, boom, now all of a sudden I'm in the Discover account. And so now I'm on the other side of this transaction. And you can see there's a payment, and this time it says payment from Mercury. All right. So on this side, it says payment to Discover, and it's $1,000 going out. And on this side, it's a payment from Mercury, and it's $1,000 coming in. So credit card payments are transfers, and they are interacting between the account that pays it and the credit card itself. Now, I could have done the exact same thing from the credit card side. So let's say instead of I'm on the Mercury account, let's say I'm on the credit card account. So I'm going to go ahead and add a transaction. Now, let's say that it says just payment, and let's say that this time it's $500 coming in, 500. All right, so now here's that transaction. YNAB has pulled it in, and I need to tell YNAB what it is. So this time, instead of telling YNAB this is a payment to Discover, I already know it's a payment to Discover. I'm in the Discover account, and it says payment. So I know it's a Discover payment. The question is, where did I pay it from? In this case, I'm going to click the payee, and you're going to notice right here at the top, it gives me two options. Did I pay this from the Mercury account, or did I pay it from my other Chase credit card? In this case, I paid it from the Mercury account, so I'm going to choose that. YNAB will label it correctly as a credit card payment, and then I hit save. And again, you'll see it has the linky arrow icon. And if I go to the Mercury side, you will see a $500 payment going out that it has created. In an ideal world, if you're linking your transactions to YNAB, YNAB is actually smart enough that when you choose it on one side, so if I choose the payment on this side, then it will actually legitimately link to an existing transaction on this side, and then all you'll need to do is approve it. Now, to tie a bow on this, you can see here that I have made a total of two payments of $1,500 in total. If I go back to my budget, a few minutes ago, we had $1,900 available that we could have made payments with. We've now made $1,500 of payments, And so we have $465 left that I could still use to make more payments to the card if I wanted to. YNAB is actually showing that it took that $1,500 away from this category behind the scenes. And if I wanted to see it, I could click the activity right here and we can see, there we go. We can see all of the different transactions as well as the transfers or credit card payments that have happened this month on that card. The big idea with helping you understand credit card payments as transfers is to stop thinking about your credit card payment as a bill. See, when I work with people, a lot of the time I'll ask them, so tell me about what bills you have. And they'll say things like, well, I've got my rent and I've got my electric bill and I got the internet bill and I got my phone bill. Oh, and I have my credit card bill. And what that tells me is that they are thinking about their credit card as a standalone bill. Instead, what YNAB is trying to get you to do is to think about the transactions and the categories that you are charging to the credit card. And so if we can just plan for all of the stuff that you're actually charging on the credit card, then you don't have to think about your credit card bill as a separate bill because we are budgeting for the stuff you're charging to the credit card, which means the money will already be there to pay the credit card bill when the payment comes. Now, for many of you, that sounds like pie in the sky and like some ideal fantasy world. And I get it. That may be just where you're at right now. And so we're going to talk about how to handle credit cards if you are floating debt or if you're in debt right now here in a second. But I need you to understand the behind the scenes and the goal of YNAB. The goal is that it's trying to force you to only use cash that you physically possess in your bank account. You may decide to use a credit card, but we are going to budget as if you can only use cash. We're not giving you access to the credit limit you have available. We are budgeting and planning as if you were going to pay for everything in cash, even if you decide to use credit. And when you do that, it helps you get out of debt you might be in, and more importantly, make sure that you don't rack up any new debt. Now, so far, we have covered the activity column for the credit card. If we click here, you can see all the different transactions that have happened on the credit card this month. We've also talked about the available column. The available column represents how much money you currently have in your bank account that's job is to pay back the credit card. AKA, if you want to know how much of a credit card payment you can afford to make, the available column will tell you. We need to understand a little bit more about what this assigned column is for the credit card because the assigned column is a little bit different than how it works for the other categories. People a lot of the time will think, well, if I charge something to the credit card, I need to assign money to cover it. You do not. We already covered how if you're assigning money for the Spotify and car insurance and Netflix, if you're assigning money for the expenses you're going to put on the card, YNAB handles it behind the scenes. So what's the assign column for? Well, the assign column for the credit card is to handle old debt. So it's either to help you get out of debt that you came into YNAB with, or if you were unable to cover all of your overspending in some previous months and you've ended up racking up a little debt, it is to help you chip away at that debt. Basically, the assigned is how much money you would like to pay to the card over and above what you've charged this month. So if this month I have charged $1,000 worth of transactions to the card, as long as I've budgeted it, well, YNAB will move it up here. But if I want to chip away at some old debt and I would like to pay an extra $100 to the card to get out of debt, well, then I would need to assign that $100 here. Now, I know this is still pretty confusing, so I want to take a minute and talk about starting balances on the credit cards and how you should have started YNAB and your credit cards, but what to do if you didn't do this and how we can fix it now. There are 3 types of people, and we're going to talk about what to do in each of those situations. I would encourage you not to fast forward the video here if you're not like the first or second type, because it will be helpful for you to understand all 3 types. So let's talk about the first type, which is going to be somebody who pays their credit card completely in full every single month, every statement they're paying off, and this person is not riding the credit card float. Now, what do I mean when I say riding the credit card float? Well, I'm going to explain this more in a second, but the way that you can tell if you're riding the credit card float or not is if you can afford to pay your card to zero. I don't mean just pay the statement off. I mean the entire balance on the card, you can wipe it out completely. The first type of person, if you can pay your card completely off right now at any moment, all you need to do is for your assigned column, right when you started YNAB, you should have budgeted enough money to cover the initial starting balance. So you'll notice that on this card, I have a starting balance on 2/24 of $25.71. All I needed to do is assign $25.71, which is telling YNAB, hey, you came into YNAB with debt of $25.71. And we don't know if you're planning to pay that off immediately or if you're planning to pay that down over time. We don't know. And so I need to assign the money and tell YNAB, I'm actually planning on paying this thing down completely, or at least I'm planning to have the ability to do that. In an ideal world, if you're type number 1 here, you would have assigned the full starting balance to this card right when you set up your budget. If you didn't do it, then totally fine. All you need to do, if you're this type of person, is if you actually click your credit card, YNAB will actually tell you on the right-hand side how much you're short, meaning how much you need to assign to be able to pay the card to zero. What do I mean when I say that? Well, if you look at the total outstanding balance on this card, it is $490.71. If you look at what I have available to pay, it is $465. So it's close. I could almost pay it to zero, but not yet. And so I need to assign $25.71, which will then make this number here, $490.71, match this number here, $490.71, which means that if I want to, I can pay the card off completely to zero. Let's talk about type number 2. Type number 2 is the person who says, I pay my credit cards off every single month. And what they mean when they say that is they pay the statement every single month. Let's talk about this and make sure everybody's on the same page for what I mean here. I'm going to come sign into my Chase account, and I'm going to click on the statements and documents category. I'm going to grab last month's statement, and here's what I want you to hone in on. At the end of my statement cycle on my last credit card statement, I had a balance of $1,200 or $1,278.79. And I had a minimum payment of $35, and that payment was due on March 5th. Now, it'll actually give me a little breakdown here. I want you to ignore all of this. What I want you to hone in on is the new balance right here, $1,278.79. That is my statement balance. That is the balance on this statement. Now, if I hit X and I come back to the home screen, you will see that I have actually already paid that statement balance. If you look at my payment activity, I've actually already paid it this month. You can see here on the 15th, I actually paid $1,278.79. So I've already paid my statement balance. I'm good to go. I don't owe any more money to this credit card this cycle. And yet, I still have a balance on the card. I still owe $1,309.46. So if I wanted to pay this card to zero, not just the statement, I still need $1,300 in order to do that. So when I'm talking about YNAB being able to pay it off in full, I'm talking about paying the full balance, not just the statement balance. So let's come back over here. If we look at this Chase credit card, you can see that my current balance on the card is $8,745. And we can just look at the bank account and see I don't have enough money to assign that. If I were to assign that money here, $8,745.40, it's going to throw me negative up top because I'm assigning money I don't have. So we can't do that. In this case, if you are this person, what you want to do is you need to set a target on the right-hand side that is the amount of money that you're going to chip away at getting off the float every month. Let me explain a little further. So if you're this person, you're probably charging to the card all the time, right? You are going to Chevron and you're putting gas in the car for $150, and then you're going to Sam's Club and you're going to put groceries on the card for $500. I'm just loading this up so you can see. And then we're going to Amazon and we're going to do some Amazon shopping for $250. And then we're going to pay a utility bill. And as long as you're budgeting to cover that stuff, then every time you do, YNAB is moving the money from those categories up here to your credit card payment category. So now I owe $10,000 total, but I can make a payment of $1,350. And technically, as long as this number is enough to cover the statement, well, then I won't rack up any interest, right? I will be able to pay my statement in full. So if you're this person, you might need to budget a little bit or assign money a little bit to this card to get you enough money sitting here to be able to make your statement. Let's say, for example, that my statement is coming up, my payment, and I gotta, pay it, and it's about $2,000. So let's say that I need to move some money from some other categories up here to the credit card payment category until I get the available column above $2,000 so that I can actually afford to pay that statement. And so I'm going to do this, Chase, and this, Chase, and there we go. Oh, I'm almost there. Let's move to Spotify. Chase, great. And so now I assigned a bunch of money to it this month just so that I could make sure I have enough to cover my statement. If this person is you, if you are riding the credit card float, you will unfortunately probably be the most annoyed and confused by this setup because you're thinking, I never pay any interest. I handle my credit cards great. And I get it. But most Americans are riding the float, and most people in first world countries that use credit cards are riding the float even if they don't know it. Because what happens is you unintentionally start charging to the card, running up the credit card bill, knowing the payment's not due until next month, and you're going to get a paycheck before then, so you'll be able to use that paycheck to pay the card off. In essence, what you're doing is you're using your paycheck to cover spending that happened in the past because you're running up the card, knowing it's not due for another couple of weeks, and so you're going to use your paycheck in the future to then deal with the card expenses. This is what creates living on the credit card float, even if you're not getting hit with any interest. If this is you, your action step here is you need to make sure that you're covered at least for the next statement so you can pay it. And then you should set a target on the right-hand side. So I'm going to set this. You're going to see I've got a target, and I pretty much always choose pay specific amount monthly. I don't really like the pay off balance by date for most people, unless you know like you're definitely going to hit a certain date. I like pay specific amount monthly, and this is going to be an amount of money that I would like to assign extra to the credit card every month to help get me off the float. In this case, maybe I'll make it $150 and I'll hit save. And so now, as part of my normal budgeting process, when I go through my routines, which, by the way, if you don't know what my routines are, check out the link in the description below to download my YNAB routines checklist. But as part of my routines, I will budget an additional $150 to the card to help get me off the float. All right, now let's talk about the third type of person. Maybe this person, you are carrying some credit card debt and you're not riding the float. You're legitimately carrying some debt. You are getting hit with interest and you're just trying to pay this thing down. What do? Well, in this case, instead of budgeting or assigning money extra enough to cover the full statement balance, I'm just trying to manage my money in a way so that I'm able to cover any overspending that's new on the card, right? I'm covering any new charges. And then I'm slowly just chipping away at the debt. And so in this case, you also want to set a target, just like the second type of person, but your target is going to be how much extra would you like to pay towards your debt every single month? That's going to help you chip away at it. And this is over and above whatever you charge. So again, if you are paying down debt, but still actively using the card, the goal here would be if you're charging $1,000 a month, but you want to chip away at the debt by $100 a month, then you want to set a target of $100 per month. And so then my goal is that every single month, in addition to budgeting for the charges, right? You can see Amazon, Chevron, Sam's, utilities. In addition to budgeting for this stuff, I'm putting another $100 towards the card. And so in this case, if I wanted to go make a credit card payment, I can afford to pay $1,450. That's the $1,350 I charged plus an additional $100. And if I can consistently do this over time, I will eventually get out of debt. Now, if you are that third type of person, you are carrying a little bit of debt right now. No shame in that. It's all good. It happens. But we need to talk about how to cover and deal with credit card interest. So let's do that next, and then we're going to talk about some pro tips for credit cards. What you want to think about with credit card interest is shifting your mindset to think about interest as an additional bill that you need to pay. Essentially, interest is just a fee that the credit card company charges you for the convenience of using their credit card and not having to pay all the money that you owe right now. What you're buying, in essence, is time. You are paying a fee every single month for more time to pay back the rest of what you owe. And so if you think about like, oh, I have my utility bills and my Netflix and my Hulu. Oh, and I also have my credit card interest bill. That's the way we kind of want to think about it. So you'll notice that I have a debt snowball group right here, and I have a few different things listed here, and then I have a dedicated category for credit card interest. Now, if you have a bunch of credit cards, a lot of people ask me, should I create a dedicated one for every credit card for each one's own interest? I think that's overkill. I mean, you obviously can if you want to do it. I think it's overkill. And so typically I'm just going to have a credit card interest category, one of them, and then I'm going to set a target on the right-hand side. And if you haven't seen my targets video, also be sure to check that out or download my targets decision tree in the link down below. But I'm going to set a target that's going to be monthly, and it's going to be for the total amount of interest that I expect to be charged. And if I have no idea, well, then I would just go again back over to my actual credit card account, and I would look at the statement, and I would try to find how much interest was charged last month, and I would just set my target close to that. In this case, I'm going to choose 75 by the last day of the month, and I'll leave it set aside another for now. So I'm going to hit save. So now all of a sudden, when I have the $75 budgeted, when that interest charge comes through, let's go ahead and put it in here. When that interest charge comes through, I just need to categorize it to the interest category, just like I would categorize anything else. And so then if I do that, interest, boom, and hit save. Now all of a sudden, YNAB will also move the money from the credit card interest category up to the credit card payment category. And so now I can actually pay another $74 to the credit card, which will pay down the interest. Again, by thinking about it this way, this ensures that you actually do make progress towards chipping away at your debt. You're not just making minimum payments that don't include interest. Because sometimes if you just make the minimum payment, it actually won't cover the interest charged. You'll actually increase your debt by only making the minimum payments. We want to avoid that. And if you do have some debt and you're working through like a debt snowball plan, I'm a big fan of the debt snowball plan, but typically what that means is you're going to pay minimums on your other credit cards while you work on one credit card at a time. Maybe it's the one with the lowest balance. And so in this case, let's pretend, I'm going to actually delete all of these transactions except for interest. Let's pretend that this particular credit card that I'm working on right here, it has $8,800. Let's pretend the minimum payment is around $150. And maybe I'm just paying the minimum on this right now because I'm working on something else. Instead of setting my target to be the minimum payment, I'm actually going to set my target to be the minimum payment minus the interest. So in this case, if my interest is roughly $75 and my minimum payment is around $150, well, then I'm going to set my target to be around, I'm going to round up a little to 80. And so now all of a sudden, when I budget 80, between the $74 of interest that I charged plus the $80 I've assigned, I will have enough money to cover my minimum payment. Right? In this example, I'm not charging anything to this card. I am just paying it down. So I'm paying the interest as an expense, and then I'm budgeting for enough to get me up to the minimum payment in my available column. Now, as a side note here, I would encourage you that if you are paying down a credit card and you're not charging to it, I would consider not even adding that credit card in YNAB at the beginning if you're a new user. Essentially, what I'm trying to do, if you've watched any of my other videos, is for new users, I'm trying to simplify as much as possible and remove areas where you can make mistakes. And so if you're brand new to YNAB and you've got some credit cards that you're working on, but you are not charging anything to it, just paying them down, I would consider not even adding the account in here at all and simply adding a category under like a debt snowball group with a target for the minimum payment. In this example, you can see I actually have an Amex Gold for $120 a month, but I don't have an Amex Gold account underneath my credit cards. I didn't even add it in there. I'm just chipping away at it with this category here. In fact, that was actually just pro tip number 1 that I just snuck in there on you. Consider not even adding your credit card accounts unless you are actively charging to them. Pro tip number 2 is to be very careful with credit card payments if you have multiple credit cards from the same bank. And specifically, the pro tip is always start categorizing with your credit cards rather than your bank accounts. So if you've got multiple Chase credit cards or multiple Wells Fargo or multiple US Bank or Bank of America, if you've got multiple cards from the same bank, you want to be very, very careful because the information that YNAB is going to import from the bank typically is going to look like Chase, thank you, or Chase Payment Mobile, or Amex online payment. And so it's not going to actually tell YNAB, at least most of the time, which checking account or which credit card this is actually for. All it's going to say is Amex payment or Chase mobile thank you, something like that. And so what happens is that YNAB learns, oh, well, Chase mobile thank you must be a credit card payment because you categorize it as a credit card payment. And so it will start to guess. And so if you have multiple cards, let's add another one in here. So let's say this is our Chase Amazon card and this is our Chase Freedom card. So what happens is on the bank side, it comes in like this, Chase mobile payment, and then it comes out as $500. And let's say the last time Chase mobile payment came through YNAB, you categorized it as a payment to the Chase Amazon card. Cool. Boom, Chase Amazon, save, great. Now it looks like this. Well, the next time YNAB brings in a transaction that says Chase mobile payment, it might automatically categorize it as a Chase Amazon payment. And it thinks that this is actually another payment to that same card, but it's wrong. In this case, this is actually a payment to the Chase Freedom card. And you would need to catch this mistake and tell YNAB, that is not the Chase Amazon, that is the Chase Freedom. And you need to then hit save there after changing that transaction. One of the ways that you can be more likely to catch this is when you are doing your daily routine, which I do my daily routine in the morning, and I always categorize my transactions first thing. If you've got white dots next to your accounts, so these white dots on the left-hand side, if you're doing it on the computer, tell us there's transactions to deal with. If you're doing it on a phone, it'll just be a banner that says you've got transactions to deal with. But I don't ever personally like to do all accounts and categorize all my transactions across all accounts. It gets very confusing, especially with credit card payments, because you'll typically have one that's going out from one account and one coming into another account, and it's easy to get mistakes happening. And so I prefer to go one account at a time. And if you're doing this on the phone, you can just click into a single account and then categorize those transactions. But I'm going to click on the Chase Amazon. And then when I see that this is a credit card payment, it becomes much easier to deal with because I don't have to guess, oh crap, which credit card was this paying? I know this was paying the Chase Amazon card because I'm in the Chase Amazon account. So I just have to tell YNAB what bank paid this. In this case, I'm going to choose payment from Mercury and then hit save. And then I'm going to go to the Chase Freedom and I'm going to click here and choose also payment from Mercury and hit save. So the key here is that when you're doing your daily categorizing of transactions, I would always start with the credit cards, then go to the bank account. That will make your life easier. And then second, related to this, I'm going to come up here and click Manage Payees. And if I have anything like this, Chase Transfer Amazon, if you see yours, you'll probably have something like this. So if you've never used Manage Payees before, It's in the top left-hand corner on the menu. Let me show that again. Right up here, click, come down to Manage Payees. This will show every payee that you've ever had in your budget, and you can set rules and stuff. But in this case, you'll notice that YNAB has basically set rules for me that, hey, anything that has online payment, thank you, or Chase Mobile, we're going to go ahead and guess that it's an Amazon transfer. I would want to turn that off, because if I have multiple credit cards, I don't want YNAB guessing that. I would rather just tell YNAB, oh, that's the Amazon, that's the Freedom. So, little pro tip if you've got multiple credit cards from the same bank. My next pro tip is going to be for weird payments. Specifically, if you pay a credit card with a bank account that is outside of YNAB, so let's say you have another checking or savings that's not in YNAB at all, and you use that thing to make a payment, and then also cash back directly to a card. What happens in this case? So let's say that a payment comes in and it's $200 directly to the card. And let's say that I also take credit card points, and that's another $100 to the card. Now, I do have a dedicated video on what to do with cashback and credit card points. You can check that out in the description below. But in this case, when I go to deal with these two transactions, I'm actually going to handle them the exact same way. Basically, if I am moving money into one of my credit cards from outside, remember that whole box analogy that we used earlier? I'm breaking the box barrier. Money is coming in from some other source and paying off the card. It's not coming from the account in YNAB. And so in this case, I'm actually going to treat it like any other income that I might have. So I'm actually going to put this in ready to assign and then hit save. And then I'm also going to put this in ready to assign and then hit save. And that's it. Credit card points going directly to the card are going to be ready to assign. And payments from outside of YNAB going to a card are going to be ready to assign. Now, I will say, and this is why this is an advanced pro tip, that this is where people's minds will just get absolutely blown and explode. It's important to understand that when you put a external credit card payment to ready to assign or credit card points to ready to assign, you actually will not end up with more money in ready to assign, believe it or not. Because when you put money into a credit card payment from outside, it does not increase the amount of money in your bank account. All it does is decrease what you owe on the card. Let me show this as an extreme example. In order to facilitate this, I'm going to move this down to the mortgage, get this nice and empty. I'm also going to delete this transaction so that it's not confusing. And let's hone in. If we now pay close attention, you will notice that the Chase Amazon has $154 available to pay the card. I owe $8,500. I have nothing in ready to assign. Let's say that I have like an emergency fund outside YNAB or something, and I just use that to pay off this credit card basically completely. So I just have payment, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make an $8,000 payment to this card. That comes into ready to assign. Okay, that's how I'm going to categorize it. And I do that because I want it to show up in my reports that way. But in this case, if I come over here, you'll notice that now, all of a sudden, my Chase Amazon is only $500, right? Because I made an $8,000 payment. But I don't have any more money in ready to assign. And this number also doesn't change. This will just like make people's brains explode. But the reason that it works this way is because when I made an $8,000 payment to this credit card, I didn't put $8,000 into the checking. And the money in the budget only includes money that is in my checking. Now, if I had put $8,000 into the checking and then made a credit card payment, then I would have seen $8,000 show up here. But in this case, it's basically as if somebody just magically paid my credit card for me, and I still have $154 over here, and I still owe $500. And so if I'd like to make a credit card payment, I can pay $154, but now instead of owing $8,500, I only owe $500. So that's the way we're going to categorize those. And related to this, credit card points, let's go ahead and take some credit card points to this guy. So credit card points, ready to assign, $500. Now check this out. I only owe $14.90 to the Discover Miles card, but I still have $19.90 available. This is the rare circumstance where if you're the type of person who can already pay their cards completely to zero, if you take cash back, you actually will end up with extra money sitting right here that you can then take and do whatever you want to with. So in this case, the process is if I take points directly to my card and I was already in a position to pay the card to zero, well, then I can come over here and I can actually say, all right, I'm going to move 500 out. And I'm going to move it to Nick's Fun Spending Money. And boom. At the end of the day, the long-term goal for everybody is to get to a place where the balances on the left-hand side, which is what you owe completely, match the available column on the right-hand side, because that would mean you can afford to pay your cards completely to zero. At this current moment, as it stands, I owe $14.90 on the Discover, and I can pay $14.90. So I can wipe that card out. That one is perfect. I owe $5.20 on the Chase Amazon. I can pay $154. So I'm close, right? I'm chipping away at the debt. I'll probably get there in a month or two, but I'm not there yet. And then on the Chase Freedom, I owe $500, and I currently don't have anything available to pay this card. So I would need to be setting a target and start working towards that. So that's it for YNAB and credit cards. If you found this video helpful, I would encourage you to check out this video here, which is all about reconciling in YNAB and how to make sure that what YNAB says your bank accounts have actually does equal what your bank account says you have. I'll see you over there.